As you can imagine, the Japanese bed is going to take on a different form as well. And it's different compared to our beds today, but it's going to look very similar to what we saw, for example, in the Romanesque in Europe. So they're going to use what is termed the futon, which is made up of 3 separate parts. What we're going to see is a mattress of some form, along with a comforter and a pillow. And sometimes we'll have multiple layers of these mattresses for comfort, but the idea is that it can be put out and then rolled up and put away every day. And you could just imagine that. Imagine taking out your bed every night when you're exhausted, making the bed, getting in it, sleeping, and then the first thing you do when you get up is actually unmake it and put it away. As opposed to the Western form, at least in my college days, which was get up, leave it how it is, come back home, fall into it, and, whatever happens, happens, I guess. Now, these would be stored in an oshere, a closet for futons and sleeping quilts. And this is usually a built-in fixture. This would be a built-in closet. Every night, these things are going to be slipped away. Now, this creates, again, that big open space. Again, it's all about multi-purpose. I can use the space for any number of different things. Just think about your bedroom for a moment. You can't really use it for a lot else. It's probably taken up primarily, by a bed. Now imagine if you took that bed and you put it away on a regular basis, either as a Murphy bed, the sort of thing you fold up against the wall, or something you can simply roll up and put in the closet. Now I've got a lot of open space. I can learn a new skill. I can learn yoga or teach my dog yoga, whatever it happens to be. We will also see the use of the makura. Now this is the quote-unquote wooden pillow. And it's not used by everyone, but it's something that they're going to get used to. Of course, you would use it from a young age, and so you're just simply used to using it. It's no different than some of the things that we do today. The idea of a couch, for example, seems very awkward and unusual when you think about it. This thing that takes up a huge amount of space, and it's simply there to sit, something I could do just as comfortably on the floor, potentially. But here we see a wooden box, typically topped with a pillow stuffed with either buckwheat chaff or sometimes rice chaff, basically the soft lining that would go around the seed when you're growing it. This is, again, the use of surplus materials. And it's something that you would get used to, the sort of thing that you might refill every harvest season. So you might look forward to that. Hey, I sleep really comfortably in the fall. We also see travel versions where they actually have storage in them, which allows for, really secure storage of valuables because it's right under your head. You'll also notice that the bottom is rounded on many of these. And that is so that as you're laying on your side, because you basically have to lay on your side on this, sometimes on your back if you get used to it, it allows the whole thing to rock with you if you end up sleeping over here, for example. It just makes for a better surface, a more stable surface to sleep on. Now, this should look very familiar because the idea of the wooden box pillow is very similar to what we saw in Egypt with this cradle for the neck, except in Egypt it was usually meant to hold the nape of the neck, so you'd be sleeping facing up. Whereas in Japan, you typically see illustrations where people are laying on their side on these. Doesn't mean they didn't lay facing up, it's just what we see in photos and painted illustrations. And I should point out before we move forward that the reason that we see this similarity is parallel development. I'm not suggesting there's any trade from Egypt to Japan necessarily, but they are coming to similar ideas. And we see parallel development throughout the history of humanity. So you would see something like this. You would see siblings generally in the same bed for the same reasons we saw in the medieval. You want that body heat under the blankets. You see the use of the pillow here under the head as she's laying on her side. You can imagine how secure that is. Obviously, someone has to get very, very close to you if they're going to steal your goods. You'll also notice that they're simply sleeping on this very thin mat on the floor. And you say, well, that has to be really painful. But if it's what you're used to, I mean, I can almost guarantee that at some point when you were 3, 4, 5 years old, you preferred sleeping on the floor to sleeping on your bed. And it probably drove your parents crazy for a while. But you just get used to things. This is what they've grown up with. And actually, you could probably change and start sleeping on the floor given enough time, probably a week, and you would be fairly well used to it. As we look around the rest of the room, and this is late 19th century, early 20th century Japanese room, you again see there's very little in the way of furnishings. And typically they would have a lamp that would sit on the floor, usually right here off the head. The reason you put it there is you're unlikely to hit it, unlike if I put it to a side that I could roll onto, or at the bottom where I might throw the blanket into it. All of it is meant for simplicity. All of it strikes us as very minimalistic, but it's not necessarily entirely minimalistic. It's more about being able to use the space that I have for as many purposes as possible.